Hello everyone and welcome to another video on basic camera gear. In this case we're looking at a possible entry-level option if you're looking for serious focal length prime telephoto lens. This is a it's a 400 millimeter lens f 6.3. It's an old design, but it's been in production for a long time, and it's branded by various different names. It's a third-party lens, so this specific model is a Pentor, but you can find it as Tokina, Soligor, Vivitar, and probably a bunch of other brands actually. They're all more or less similar. There are some differences. I've noticed that this Pentor looks the most similar to the Tokina 400 millimeter of 6.3. So for whatever that's worth, it seems very similar to that. Let's look at the lens. Why do I have it? Well, basically because it's cheap, and as I mentioned, it's a good option if you want to get into some semi-serious telephoto as an amateur, I guess. This is a very good option. Between 50 and 100 euro, you can find it in stores, or secondhand stores probably. If you're lucky enough, you can find it online for less. I've seen people buy it for like $25 or something. So it's a very cheap entry level lens, and it definitely will deliver for the money you're spending. Although maybe 100 euro might be a little steep for this. I would really not go over the 50 mark personally. But let's see the lens. As you can see, it's pretty big. So luckily it comes equipped with a tripod mount, with a tripod collar for mounting your lens to a tripod. So that's pretty nice detail. And controls are really basic actually. You have aperture control. It goes between, mine goes between 6.3 and f22, but I know there are models that go further than the 22. So you might want to check that out too. And then you have this open closed ring. This basically, when it's in open position, well, let's see if we can see. Okay, as you see, when operating the aperture ring, depending on the f-stop you select, the diaphragm closes more or less. And this will limit eventually the amount of light that comes through the lens into your camera, into your viewfinder. So it might actually make it quite complex to focus or compose when you're stopped at, let's say, f22 or 16. So this opening closing mechanism basically opens the diaphragm completely in order for you to compose or focus, and when you're ready to shoot, you just switch it and it goes back to whatever setting you preset on your aperture ring. So let's see it in action. Now currently it's on open, or actually it would be on closed in this case. So it's pushed to the right, and we can see the diaphragm is pretty closed. And if I move the aperture ring, you can see the diaphragm closing and opening. However, once I switch the open close ring as I'm doing now, the diaphragm will open up completely or go back to whatever aperture I selected. So yeah, it's a helpful tool it's a helpful tool because in harsh light or strong light, when you need to be at 22, that can really be a little bit of a nuisance. The only defect is it doesn't have a block or click, or it doesn't have anything really to regulate its turning. So often I notice that when operating the aperture ring, this will just kind of shift and move, and that's not really cool. It might be that there's some screw missing or something is actually damaged in the lens I have, but yeah, just a heads up if this is something you're looking to buy. And last moving part is the focusing ring, which is not even the ring actually. As you can see, the whole front part of the lens rotates. So this might be an issue if you're using a polarizing filter, because of course, as you change your focus, the filter will turn, so you might not obtain the effect you were looking for. But other than that, this is the lens. What we're gonna do now is show how easy it is to take a lens like this apart, look how it is, look at it at its insides, and understand why a 400 millimeter prime lens can cost so little. And there's no real secret. It's cheaply built. The feel is actually pretty good. It's all metal, mostly metal. However, it does feel a little flimsy. So, this is already a first sign of you get what you paid for. If you're concerned about a millimeter give in your mechanisms, you might want to overlook buying one of these. But if you just want to play around with a telephoto, it's definitely a nice toy to have. And again, this might be my model. I mean, it might be that 99% of these lenses has no give or problem. But let's start taking it apart and see how complex it can be. So tools we're going to need are this one screwdriver. It could be two because there are Phillips and slot screws, but this will work pretty good for both. There's a total of less than 10 screws in the whole lens, so it should be pretty simple. So first thing we can take apart is the mount. I guess this is for cheapness. It's much easier to just mount different adapters. It's much easier to build all lenses standard and then just mount a screw mount depending on what you need. So there you go. I'm pretty sure you can find adapters for different brands. Now, another interesting thing in the fact of how these lenses have little variations but are in the end standardized is this extra kind of extension tube. I've seen a video showing the Tokina model, which apparently has this part of the lens which is unscrewable too, with the interesting addition that then the mount can be rescrewed to the back of this part of the lens, which is the original lens in itself. This is because, as designed, well, apparently from what I saw on I'll link actually the video with the review in the description so you can check it out for yourself. But apparently the reason is that it doesn't focus close enough. So this was given as an extra option. You could screw this in as an extension tube, and this would basically enable you to kind of, well, focus closer, give you some kind of a macro effect. Now, I'm not sure this is, I'm guessing if they're all built in the same way for scale economy reasons, it might be that this glass element is added to counter that macro effect, perhaps, but because in this case this isn't optional. There's no way of screwing the end to this part of the lens. So I'm sure this lens was built like this. This isn't just an extension tube. So what I wonder is if they had to add this extra piece, it might be because in the same production line they're also making the Tokina models, which have this optional extension tube available. So I don't know if that's true. If any one of you took apart the Tokina model, perhaps get in touch and we can try and discover something. So there we go. We can remove the the tripod collar. Move it aside. So far no screws. Now we can remove the front element of the lens. Again, just by unscrewing, comes apart. This is the main element in the lens. So we have basically the actual lens itself, and then we have one more glass element, that's this one at the back. And I think this is to correct the macro effect, as I was mentioning, because the guy in the video I'm referring to mentioned that this is actually the only glass in the lens, which kind of surprised me because I have this element as well. So I don't know, maybe material for some next video or at least some research. So, well, there goes the lens. Let's move it aside. And basically what we're left with is the focusing mechanism thread. and we're left with the aperture mechanisms and whatnot. So this can unscrew as well. Easy as pie. And yeah, basically we're left with the actual moving parts of the actual mechanisms of the lens, which by the way are quite simple. You'll see there's one glass element here, and that's basically it. So now to take it apart, to further take it apart, we need to unscrew these little slot drive screws. Let's see if it focuses. Yeah, there we go. Well, it's a screw. So out they come. Oh man. Yeah, not the best way to start. Two. And guess one's missing here. Okay. And now we can unscrew these. One. Two. Three. So these last screws I took out are the ones holding the focus thread. This is basically the focus mechanism attached to the aperture mechanism and the rest of the lens. So the other two screws I detached basically enable you to take them to unmount, to disassemble the focusing mechanism. So as you see, I won't actually, oh damn it, I just did. Oh man. I've often had issues when unthreading completely these. Oh shit. Okay, I'm gonna have to fix that somehow. But anyway, basically, this is your focusing mechanism. It's just a thread. It's held in place. There are these three pieces, and that's your focusing mechanism. So we'll just put that aside, and we'll think about it in better times. Last piece left is our aperture mechanism area and the back element of the lens. So this is held in place by this one screw. It's a Phillips screw, so I shouldn't be pushing like this, but okay, here we go. I was a little optimistic. Okay, there we go. And now we can separate the glass element, so the last tube of the lens here with the last glass element, from the aperture mechanism. So here we can actually see what I was referring to earlier. When you change your aperture settings, the diaphragm moves. Well, not if the position, if the, yeah. Okay, so the diaphragm will open and close. Then your open-close ring basically determines, it keeps your lens fully open, or it enables it to go down to whatever setting you've put. But as you can see, every time you try to move this one rotates too, so this is kind of shit, to be honest. But there you go. Lens is basically apart. The elements you have are these. You have the aperture mechanisms, which I actually won't touch because, well, I don't need to, so I don't want to break stuff. But they're in here. You have your two glass elements. Oh man, back and front. Here you go. You have your focusing elements, which are here. And then you have connecting transitions and, different threaded pieces to keep everything together. So there you go. This is a 400 millimeter f6.3 prime lens manual focus M42 screw mount lens taken apart, and I'll just put it apart and show you that I didn't destroy it in order to make this video. And yeah, and then, well, two things to note just before I get to putting everything back together are: one, you might want to watch when you have grease-filled elements and a nice white surface, but you know, lesson learned, the more you know. The second thing is that wobbliness I was mentioning earlier probably comes from these three screws being semi-unscrewed. So luckily I actually opened the whole thing, because I noticed that this metal thread, this greased up thread, was barely being held in place by these three screws. So I hope once I get everything back together, if this doesn't prove to be an unsurmountable obstacle, but I'm hoping once everything is back together, the lens will be a little sturdier. So yeah. Now, I already messed up one lens this way. I'm not sure if there's a specific technique to actually rethread, put it back in place once the two threads have come apart, but it's not as easy as a normal screw or as a normal thread. So I definitely, if I want to be doing this more often, I'll definitely have to check how to do it more efficiently. But just know that once you, in my experience at least, once you've unthreaded it, once you've taken them apart and put them back together, you have a very limited number of times you can actually do that before you mess up the thread and the piece doesn't actually even fit anymore. So that's how I ruined one lens. So yeah, luckily I was able to put it back together. Now I'll just try to keep the number of times I take it apart really to a minimum. But I'll keep filming the rest of the reassembly because, I don't know, might be interesting. So this is the focusing mechanism is back in place. Now I'll just screw the back element of the lens to the aperture control mechanisms. Oh, well, silly me. So there we go. That was easier said than done, actually. And now we can take the, well, more screwing required. Be right back. Has ended. The piece is back in place. I just wanted to remind you, when you're putting it back together, I mean, this might have to be true in general when putting things together, but maybe not always. But in this case, really tighten these screws down well, because otherwise the whole lens will just feel wobbly. This I had noticed already once when I took it apart. I didn't screw them down too much, and the lens just felt like a toy. It felt like it was coming. Actually, this whole piece rotated completely. Like now you can see it's fixed. The red dot to the center of the indicators, it's fixed in position, which is now irrelevant, by the way, because this is out of alignment anyway. But it doesn't matter. The point is that this will all rotate on you if you don't screw those three in place decently. So let's finish putting it together. Should be a simple matter. Oh, well, things just don't seem. Oh man, sometimes you just need a little bit of convincing. And there we go, back in place. Let's put the lens mount back in place. Oh, I was forgetting a screw. This one here. I guess I won't stop the video for this. It's just one screw, but... Ah, man. It's always the last one. But there we go. Nice and tight. And we're ready. This can go back in place. This can go back in place. Here we go. Mount can go back in place. And last, but definitely not least, your front element. So there you go, with a total, I think, of 7 screws. Although, to be fair, there are 3 screws even here in the mount that keep another little ring in place, but that's kind of irrelevant. So let's say 10 screws, 400mm lens. You can tear it down in 10 minutes. So thank you for watching. I hope this helps you if you're having any issues, if you have fungus, dirt, any kind of crud in your lens that you need to clean, if you really like it, or if you just like taking stuff apart and checking it out. If you need to change mount, I hope this teardown will be useful for you. Daylight's going, as you can probably see in the video, so I'll just cut it short. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Guess what? No more wobbling. It was those 3 screws that had come apart. So yeah, lucky I took it apart.